Communication is the invisible thread that holds together our relationships, our decisions, and even the way we perceive ourselves. Yet most people talk a lot and understand very little. The truth is that a meaningful conversation is not built only on words, but on the way we listen, the clarity with which we express ourselves, the ability to see the world through another person's eyes, the alignment between body and speech, the control of our own emotions, and the way we give and receive feedback. In this video, we will reflect on 6 key principles that make any dialogue deeper, more honest, and truly transformative. Because communicating well is not just a social skill, it is an exercise in humanity and maturity. Active listening is an art that begins in the body and solidifies in the mind. It is about being fully present with your senses and genuinely intending to understand, rather than simply reacting. To grasp why this transforms conversations, consider the psychological mechanism behind human openness. When people feel accepted and unhurried, the nervous system relaxes, defenses lower, and speech shifts from defensive to exploratory. Carl Rogers demonstrated that such acceptance encourages authentic expression, while Socratic philosophy teaches that intellectual humility, admitting we don't know everything, creates space for mutual discovery. In practice, active listening involves 3 clear steps: mindful attention, verification, and emotional containment. Mindful attention means focusing entirely on what the other person is saying in the moment, putting aside your phone, suspending the urge to plan a response, and noticing what isn't being said. Pauses, voice fluctuations, and gestures carrying meaning. Verification uses paraphrasing and open-ended questions. Turn what you heard into a simple statement. So, what I'm hearing is X, is that correct? Or ask, how was that experience for you? These tools check understanding before moving on to interpretation. Emotional containment involves recognizing the other person's feelings, naming them when appropriate. It seems that left you frustrated, while resisting the urge to immediately solve their problem. Listening well often requires tolerating the other's discomfort without rushing to fix it. Avoid common traps, interrupting with corrections, judging or comparing experiences, and offering automatic advice. These behaviors undermine trust and shut down the flow of sharing. Use silence intentionally. A pause after someone speaks allows them to add details, reorganize thoughts, and feel respected. Don't fear silence. It is an active part of listening. Physically, maintain an open posture. Subtly lean toward the speaker. Use natural eye contact and micro-signals like small nods or brief verbal affirmations. Alignment between gaze, facial expression, and voice reinforces that your listening is not merely a technique, but a sincere attitude. To deepen this skill, practice simple, direct exercises. Listen without interruption for 2 minutes and then summarize in 1 sentence. Conduct a daily 10-minute session of intentional listening with someone. Aim to listen and paraphrase without trying to solve. Notice and name your internal emotions while listening to avoid projecting them onto the other person. And afterwards, write down 3 points you understood and 1 question about what remained unclear. It is also crucial to recognize boundaries. Listening does not require submission to others' expectations or exposing yourself beyond comfort. When conversations push personal limits, being honest about needing a break or setting agreements is itself a mature form of listening. Finally, remember that deep listening has ethical and practical effects. It fosters respect, reduces unnecessary conflict, and opens the way to shared solutions. This skill sharpens with intentional practice. Listen more to understand, less to respond, and observe how the other person's world begins to reveal motives and meanings previously unnoticed. From this richer listening, the words that follow gain direction and purpose. Clarity and simplicity are often underestimated forces in communication, yet they determine whether a message truly reaches the heart and mind of the listener. Psychology shows us that the human brain has limits of attention and working memory. The more complex the language, the easier it is for someone to get lost, misinterpret, or simply give up following. Messages filled with elaborate terms or excessive explanations may seem sophisticated, but in practice they create barriers between speaker and listener. Clear, direct, and simple speech, on the other hand, reduces confusion and enhances understanding, building bridges instead of walls. Philosophically, clarity is connected to the pursuit of truth. The Stoics taught that life becomes lighter when we distinguish what depends on us from what does not, stripping away unnecessary layers of judgment or embellishment. The same applies to language. Removing excess, cutting through noise, and getting to the core is a form of honesty. Direct speech is not coldness, it is respect, showing that you value the other person's time and mental energy. Conversely, convoluted or exaggerated language can hide insecurity, manipulation, or the desire to impress without truly communicating. To make your speech clearer, several practices are essential. First, organize your thoughts. Focus on one idea at a time, avoiding mixing multiple topics in a single sentence. Second, choose simple words that anyone can understand, regardless of their background. Third, use concrete examples whenever possible, as examples translate theory into reality. Avoid generalizations like "you always" or "you never," which create resistance and shut doors. Instead, describe specific behaviors in specific situations. Another powerful strategy is turning criticism into descriptive observations. Instead of labeling someone as disorganized, describe what happened. In Monday's meeting, I noticed the reports weren't ready on time. This approach does not attack the person's identity, but points to observable facts that can be addressed constructively, reducing defensiveness and opening space for solutions. Simplicity also appears in the rhythm of speech. Short pauses between sentences help the listener process what has been said. A rushed or overly detailed speech can overload attention and dilute what truly matters. A measured pace, emphasizing only the essential, conveys confidence and clarity. Tone of voice is equally important. Speaking calmly, firmly, and clearly reinforces the message. It is useful to train the ability to summarize. Take one idea and try explaining it in 1 minute, then 30 seconds, and finally 10 seconds. This exercise reveals what is truly essential and what can be removed. Simple communication is the result of clear thinking. Those who express themselves well have organized their own ideas before sharing them. Finally, clarity does not mean a lack of depth. A message can be profound and transformative precisely because it is delivered simply. Great philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius wrote about existential matters in short, precise sentences that have lasted for centuries. Simplicity has the power to reach anyone, in any context. When we speak clearly and simply, we create more than understanding. We create trust. And when trust exists, the space to step into the other person's perspective naturally expands. Empathy and perspective are two keys that unlock doors that would otherwise remain closed in communication. Having empathy doesn't just mean feeling what the other person feels. It also means understanding where they are coming from, the logic behind their worldview, and the experiences that have shaped their interpretations. Social psychology calls this the theory of mind, the ability to imagine another person's thoughts, beliefs, and intentions. When we activate this skill, we increase our chances of engaging in constructive dialogue because we stop seeing the other as an obstacle and start seeing them as a human being with reasons and a personal history. From a philosophical perspective, empathy resembles hermeneutics, the art of interpreting texts and contexts. Each person is, in a sense, a book in motion, written by their culture, pain, joys, and limits. Trying to understand someone is like trying to read that book. It requires patience, openness, and a willingness to engage with ambiguity. The philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer said that understanding is always a fusion of horizons. Our horizon meets the other person's horizon, and in that meeting, something new emerges that belongs to neither one alone. In practice, cultivating empathy and perspective begins with a simple mindset. Ask yourself what the other person might be experiencing beneath the surface. If someone reacts aggressively, instead of labeling them as difficult, consider what unmet need might be driving this reaction. This reflection does not justify inappropriate behavior, but allows us to see beyond the label and respond intelligently. Another practical approach is putting yourself in their situation. If I had experienced this, I might have reacted similarly. This type of reflection broadens your view and prevents snap judgments. It is also valuable to express empathy verbally. Phrases like, "I can imagine that was tough for you," or "I understand that this situation might be frustrating," validate the other person's experience without necessarily agreeing with it. This act of acknowledgement does not compromise your own perspective but shows respect and recognition. Often, simply feeling recognized is enough to reduce tension and create space for a more balanced conversation. Listening to personal stories is another essential practice. When we ask someone to share a bit of their experiences, we deepen our understanding of how they think and feel. This strengthens bonds and increases tolerance. After all, when we know someone's journey, it becomes harder to treat them as an adversary. Philosophical traditions support this principle. The more we understand the circumstances and contexts of another's life, the fairer our assessment becomes. It is also important to remember that empathy does not mean abandoning yourself. You can understand another's perspective without agreeing with it. This is maturity. The challenge is to maintain balance, opening yourself to see beyond your own lens while standing firm when necessary. In this way, dialogue does not become submission, but an enriching exchange. When we apply empathy and perspective, we stop seeing the other person merely as someone speaking and start seeing them as someone who feels, thinks, and moves within their own universe. This broader understanding strengthens relationships, dissolves unnecessary conflict, and deepens the quality of communication. And when this depth is present, non-verbal expression, through body and voice, becomes even more impactful. A large part of our communication happens without words. Gestures, posture, facial expressions, tone of voice, pauses, and even the rhythm of breathing convey signals that shape how we are perceived. Numerous studies show that in an interaction, most of the emotional impact comes not from the content of words, but from how they are expressed. When someone says, "I'm fine," with a tense face and stiff shoulders, the message received is not calm, but discomfort. This reveals a crucial point. Most of the time, we trust the body more than the words. Psychology emphasizes that congruence is what gives credibility to speech. Congruence means aligning what we feel, think, and express. When emotion and words are coherent, the message gains strength and inspires trust. Otherwise, a discrepancy arises that creates unease. Philosophically, Merleau-Ponty asserted that the body is not merely a vessel for the mind, but the primary means of human expression. Even before verbal language, the body speaks, reveals, and exposes. Developing this skill requires training perception. A simple exercise is to record yourself speaking on any topic and carefully observe whether your face, tone, and words are telling the same story. Often, we notice excessive haste, rigid gestures, or expressions that don't match the content. Adjusting one element at a time helps create harmony. Pausing more, softening your tone, or opening your posture can already change the impression you make. It is also important to notice whether your body language draws others closer or pushes them away. Crossed arms, a wandering gaze, or turning away signal closure, while a relaxed posture, balanced eye contact, and natural gestures signal openness. It is also important to remember that nonverbal communication varies across cultures, but there are universal emotional signals. A genuine smile, for example, is rarely interpreted negatively. The key is to cultivate authenticity. Congruence doesn't come from rehearsed gestures, but from internal alignment. The more mind and body are connected, the truer the message becomes. Trust emerges from this integrity, and it is trust that sustains any meaningful dialogue. And when trust exists, it becomes possible to take an even deeper step, learning to manage intense emotions that, if unregulated, can undermine all forms of communication. Emotions are powerful forces that shape our conversations. When they rise to high intensity, they can block reason, distort listening, and lead to impulsive reactions we often regret. Cognitive behavioral psychology explains that emotions arise from interpretations. It's not just the event itself that affects us, but the meaning we assign to it. If someone is late, I might interpret it as, "They don't care about me," and feel anger, or as, "Something unexpected happened," and feel understanding. The emotion changes according to our interpretation. Stoic philosophy reinforces this perspective by reminding us that we cannot control events, but we can control our reactions. This means we don't have to be slaves to our impulses. We can learn to regulate emotional responses consciously. One of the most effective tools is breathing. Inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 3, and exhaling slowly activates brain areas that reduce impulsivity. Naming the emotion also helps. Telling yourself, "I am angry," or "I am anxious," decreases the intensity of the reaction because the brain treats the emotion as information rather than a threat. Another practical tool is the pause. Many people feel they must respond immediately in a difficult conversation, but taking a moment can be the best choice. Saying, "I need a minute to organize my thoughts," is not a sign of weakness, but of maturity. This pause prevents emotional outbursts and allows reasoning to regain control. It's also helpful to keep the goal of the interaction in mind. Before reacting, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve with this conversation? This simple question restores focus and reduces the likelihood of destructive responses. Controlling emotions doesn't mean repressing them, but recognizing and channeling them productively. Anger, for example, can be used to set boundaries, as long as it is expressed clearly and firmly, without aggression. Sadness can bring people closer when shared honestly. Maturity lies in transforming emotion into a message rather than an attack. When we learn to manage our emotions, we regain power over our choices. We stop being driven by impulses and begin to guide the conversation with balance and purpose. It is within this balance that we can give fairer feedback and ask questions that open paths for growth. Feedback is not just about pointing out mistakes, it is an opportunity for mutual growth. For it to be effective, it must be specific, objective, and focused on behaviors rather than personal judgments. When someone hears "you're disorganized," it attacks their identity. When they hear, "in yesterday's meeting, I noticed the reports weren't ready on time," they receive a concrete observation that can be discussed and adjusted. This type of clarity reduces defensiveness and opens space for practical solutions. Psychology recommends the SBI method: situation, behavior, and impact. First, describe the situation, in yesterday's presentation. Then the observed behavior, you didn't present the complete data. And finally, the impact. This made it harder for the team to make quick decisions. This structure avoids generalizations and keeps the focus on what truly matters. But feedback should not be only about pointing out what needs improvement. Recognizing achievements and progress strengthens self-esteem and fosters motivation. Balancing acknowledgement with constructive suggestions creates an environment where the other person feels they can grow without fear of being diminished. Philosophically, we can think of the Socratic method. Instead of imposing answers, we ask questions that encourage reflection. Open-ended questions like, "How do you see this situation?" or "What do you think we could do differently?" create dialogue instead of monologue. This approach not only improves communication but also stimulates autonomy and responsibility. Giving and receiving feedback also requires humility. The giver must be careful not to use communication as a weapon, and the receiver must be willing to distinguish criticism from attack and see it as an opportunity to grow. This is only possible when the goal is understanding and improvement, not winning an argument. When feedback and powerful questions enter communication, conversations cease to be arenas of confrontation and become spaces for learning. And it is in this space that true transformation in relationships occurs. Communication is an art that must be cultivated. Perfection doesn't exist, only progress. The 6 tips: active listening, speaking with clarity, practicing empathy, aligning non-verbal language, regulating emotions, and offering constructive feedback are like navigational instruments for smoother interactions with others. Psychology provides practical tools, and philosophy gives the ethical and reflective pulse to use them wisely. Here's a practice suggestion for the next 7 days. Choose 1 chapter per day, apply the techniques in at least 1 conversation, and note 3 observations about what changed. At the end of the week, review your notes and choose 1 skill to deepen. Thank you for listening, and remember, every conversation is an opportunity to get closer to others and to yourself.